Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the National Center for Rural Road Safety September webinar entitled Utilizing Intelligent Transportation Systems for Rural Road Safety. My name is Jamie Sullivan, and I am the Safety Center Manager. We're going to get started here by closing out our polls. It looks like we have the majority of you, about 50%, joining us from the West today. We have about 20% from the Midwest, 20% from the Southeast, and about 7% of you from the Northeast today. Most of you are joining us in a room by yourself, about 75% of you, although there are several groups. And when I do move over to the presentation, I will explain, as always, how to go ahead and send us your group lists. It looks like for organizations, we have about 36% of you who are private consultants, about 36% of you who are state DOTs, 11% local DOTs, 8% federal DOT, about 3% tribal government, and about 6% of other federal, state, or local governments today joining us. And most of you are joining us by computer only, about 65% of you. For those of you who are joining us by computer only, if you do have any issues with the sound for today's webinar at any point, we would ask you to go ahead and dial into the meeting. The phone number can be found in the top left-hand corner, and again, that is only if you have any issues with the sound. Sometimes audio issues occur when you're on a Wi-Fi connection. At this point, I'm going to move us over to the presentation and go through a few more webinar logistics before I get us started today. So for today's webinar, it will be an hour and a half long, and it is being recorded. Because it is being recorded, the phones will be muted during the presentation for all attendees. In order to ask a question, you may use the chat pod over on the left-hand side. You can go ahead and put your questions in there at any point in time during the webinar. You do not have to wait until we get to a question and answer section. There will be 4 question and answer sections available in today's webinar. If you are listening to us on the phone, we would ask you to please mute your computer speakers, otherwise you will hear feedback. At some point during the webinar, we will have a live demonstration of a website, and there will also be a few times where there are graphics shown on the screen. If you'd like to make your screen full screen at that point in time to be able to see it at a more appropriate size, you can use the arrow keys that point outward in the top right-hand corner. There are 4 of them. That will make your screen full screen. It will get rid of all the attendee lists and chat pods along the outside corner of your screen. There is a handout pod as well in the bottom the bottom left-hand corner. That gives you the PDF version of today's slides in case you'd like that for a resource after the fact. That will provide you with any resource links that the presenters will be giving you today. Also, as I mentioned before, if you are one of those groups that are attending today's webinar, if you could please send names and emails of those in your group to info@ruralsafetycenter.org. We'll get you added to our list for the surveys that will come out directly following today's webinar. There will be 2 surveys that we will send. The first one, as I mentioned, will come directly after today's webinar, and that one will allow you to not only tell us how the webinar went, but also allow you to be able to choose certificates of completion and CEUs for today's webinar. So again, if you are interested in either of those, the only way to ask for those is through the survey. The second survey will come out about 3 months later, and it will ask what you did with the information from today's webinar, whether or not you shared it with some other staff members, if you've implemented anything based on today's information, or if you've gone to look for additional information. We're just looking to see how everyone is using the information. Today's survey link, I will put a copy over in the chat pod later on, just in case you do not receive it in your emails. Sometimes they do go into junk mail, so please make sure you do check that after today's webinar if you did not receive it in your inbox. The survey will close 2 weeks after the webinar, so you can expect to see certificates and the PDF format for the CEUs from us within 3 to 4 weeks after today's webinar. Please note that we do have to make these certificates manually, so that's why it does take a little bit of time. The CEU forms can be filled out and returned to continuinged@montana.edu and not to the Safety Center. Those are taken care of by a different group within Montana State University for us. And you can request a verification of completion form to show what CEUs you have received from Montana State University. On this slide, you'll see on the left-hand side is the course registration form that we'll send you to fill out, and in the bottom right, you'll see the verification of completion form, which will show what webinars of ours you have requested CEUs for. And now we're going to talk about today's presenters. We do have 4 presenters for you today. Our first one is Natalie Villwock-Witte. She is an assistant research professor and research engineer for the Western Transportation Institute at Montana State University in Bozeman, Montana, and a member of the Safety Center. She brings more than 13 years of experience from both the practitioner and research side of transportation engineering. She earned her doctorate and Master of Science in Civil Engineering from Purdue University and her Bachelor of Science in Civil Engineering from the University of Minnesota. She is a licensed professional engineer in the state of New Mexico. Next, we'll have Bob Fifer. Bob has 25 years telecommunications and IT professional experience that he brought to the state of Colorado's Department of Transportation. He leverages his in-depth industry knowledge and passion for partnerships to advance the visions and goals of the department's Division of Mobility Operations and Intelligent Transportation Systems teams by promoting and advancing technology into the transportation network. He also serves as a city council member for the city of Arvada, Colorado, vice chair of the Regional Metropolitan Planning Organization, and a member of the FCC's Intergovernmental Advisory Committee. We'll then have Tim Simodynes from Iowa Department of Transportation. Tim has been with Iowa DOT for 21 years, including the last 6 as the Intelligent Transportation Systems Engineer. Tim works to identify and implement technologies that improve traffic operations and safety in Iowa, and that improve the effectiveness of Iowa's statewide traffic management center. And finally, we'll have Sinclair Stolle from Iowa Department of Transportation. Sinclair is the Traffic Management Systems Engineer in Traffic Operations at Iowa DOT, managing the ATMS and ATIS programs. She has 12 years of experience in urban freeway design, along with the past 10.5 years in ITS. She's currently on the board of the Enterprise Pooled Fund and recently served on the ITS Heartland Board of Directors for 5 years. She has a BS degree in Civil Engineering from Iowa State University and is a registered professional engineer in the state of Iowa. So we thank all of our speakers today for giving up their time to present to everybody. Our goals of this webinar: once you've completed this webinar, you will have an overview of the Safety Center's newly released Rural Intelligent Transportation Systems Toolkit, as well as the rural ITS case studies from Iowa and Colorado. To achieve this webinar goal, you will learn how to summarize how to utilize the newly released Rural ITS Toolkit, to restate how Colorado DOT is planning for Colorado's ITS future, to identify the pros and cons of a statewide approach to intelligent work zones in Iowa's case study, and to summarize Iowa's approach to smart truck parking. And before we get started with our first speaker, we do have one quick poll question for everybody. And that is, what is your current knowledge of the Safety Center's Rural ITS Toolkit? I have used it, I have heard of it but not used it, I have not heard of it. And we do have a question over in the chat pod real quick about signing in today as a guest, and will you still receive the survey? So today's registration on the webinar system is not how we do the surveys and emails. It is if you registered online earlier with us with your email. If you did not register online for today's webinar, you can go ahead and put your email in the chat pod or privately chat message one of the 2 WTI staff members up in the top and provide your email, and we'll get you that survey for the CEUs. So it does look like 54% of you have not yet heard of the ITS Toolkit, 39% of you have heard of it but have not used it, and about 6% of you have used it. So we're looking forward to telling you more about this ITS Toolkit and showing you the live demonstration. And our first speaker is going to be Natalie Villwock-Witte to talk about the Safety Center's ITS Toolkit. Natalie?
Thank you, Jamie. We'll just wait for the presentation to load up here. And thank you everybody for joining us, whether it's the morning or afternoon. We look forward to sharing with you more, and we would love to hear back from you regarding how you are using it for the few people that are, and we hope that those that are learning about it will have the opportunity to use it in the near future then as well. Amy, are you seeing it? Because I'm not seeing it from my end, so I just want to make sure it's not just my computer.
I can see it, yes.
At this point, Jamie, I am not seeing the presentation. Do you want me to just go through anyways? You want to help me advance it?
Yep, I can do that.
Okay. Oh, there we go. I'm seeing it live now. So to tell you guys a little bit about why we wanted to update the Rural Intelligent Transportation Toolkit. I'm sure all of you that are familiar with technology, whether it's just from a smartphone or implementing these great tools in your everyday life, knowing that the last one was created in 1997 is basically light years away from 2018 because technology is rapidly advancing. So we wanted to update, to expand, to ensure that the tools that were provided within it are relevant and to make sure it's useful to those who are using it. And of course, one of the best ways of updating it as well, we know from many of the practitioners, are to include many, many examples, and we've really worked on doing that with the current tool, and especially those up-to-date examples as we could find. So again, as you have more of those, do let us know those as well. Furthermore, when you look at tools that may have been cost prohibitive only 5 to 10 years ago, as technology advances, we know that the cost goes down, so they may now be financially feasible. So why did the Safety Center itself update it? Most simply, it was requested by Federal Highway Administration, and here's the link for the toolkit itself at the top. It also goes along with the Safety Center's mission of focusing on enhancing safety on rural roadways by supporting local, state, and tribal road owners and their stakeholders. So this really fits well into it because of the information that's provided within. The tool was shared in several avenues to date. The Transportation Research Board annual meeting, in the past we've done that as well. Hopefully you guys have seen it within the emails that have been sent out or the Sidekick News. It has also been distributed through the Federal Highway Administration Safety Compass. And finally, I'll be presenting on it in the upcoming NRIDS. So if you are there, do let us know or do check it out. The intended use is it's not supposed to be a one-size-fits-all resource. It can be modified or used in a variety of ways is what our anticipation would be. Please keep in mind that when you look at the tools that are considered within, to many that maybe are working in urban environments, those tools may be commonplace, but they're still to some degree emerging or seeing their place come to fruition in these rural areas. They're really also intended to be more of an introduction of the information about these specific tools. So they're not a deep dive, but we do have opportunities within them to find out more information by the sources that we've contained. We also cited or identified many low-cost tools within. As we know, particularly in rural environments, there's not a lot of access resources to draw on to implement these. And then we also are focusing, of course, on rural practitioners. And so one doesn't have to be intimately familiar with ITS to use these tools because they're really this introductory source that then you can learn more about. There are 7 categories of tools. So you have the crash countermeasures, traffic management, or TM, operations and maintenance, OM, emergency services, ES, surface transportation and weather, STW, rural transit and mobility, and tourism and travel information, TTI. And we mentioned those specific ones because now as we go into the live demonstration, you'll see those acronyms identified. So Dina, if you want to help me. So I'm going to share my screen to just go through real quick how you can access the Rural Intelligent Transportation System Toolkit. Hopefully you guys are all familiar with the National Center for Rural Road Safety's website by now. If you check out resources, you can do the pull down tab, and at the bottom here is the Rural Intelligent Transportation System Toolkit link, so you would click on that. Once you scroll down on the page, once you get to the page itself, you'll see more of an overview. And so we're going to click here to look at the primer, which provides more information similar to what I just talked about in the presentation itself. So it goes back through that introduction, provides more details about the audience, so thinking really broadly about who might want to particularly use it. Again, those categories of tools, those 7 ones that I introduced earlier, are discussed within, and it talks about some of the summary tables and sheets. So the summary table itself, if you look back at the beginning, has all of these specific critical needs in one column, the strategies, which relate to really some of the aspects of the Safety Center, and then of course we all want to know costs, and it gives it in terms of qualitative categories, so low, medium, high, and higher. And so when you look at these various tools, you can see which ones might be identified. Say, for example, if you wanted to address crash issues, you could go through and look in and find the tools that have the CC by them. And so that's the intent of this nice summary table for that purpose. As I mentioned earlier, the 7 different categories, when you scroll down on the page that I showed you at the introduction, you can find those 7 categories here, and it allows you to visually see what tools are within each category. And now I'm going to step into one of the tool sheets itself. So each tool sheet has maybe a maximum of about 3 to 4 sheets, depending on how much information and content is available on the topic. And so looking at this a little bit closer, you can see the title of the tool at the top, tying back to those categories that I mentioned earlier. So the TM2, in this particular one for variable speed limits, we do provide images for each of them, a short description at the top. Again, you can see in this particular case, it doesn't just cover the crash countermeasures. We talk about operations and maintenance and ties with that. And again, the issues. So you can kind of see how each of these tie through the various aspects. As I mentioned earlier, the examples of implementation, not only do we provide a short overview of them, but we also provide a link back to some additional resources that you might want to consider. It talks about some of the components that this tool would be expected to have, how maybe partnerships can enhance the application of the tool itself, and then some pros, cons, and general information that you might want to consider in looking at this tool. We also know that to be able to leverage tools for more kind of return on investment is always wanted and needed. So we have opportunities and thoughts regarding future expansion of the tool. And then we have the cost range, as mentioned earlier, and you'll see these nice visuals to look at the variety of different cost measures. So with that, that will be my overview of the Intelligent Transportation System Toolkit. Jamie?
Perfect. Thank you very much, Natalie. And at this time, we will take any questions in the chat pod. It does look like some of you may have had a black screen for the presentation. What we will do is that we do have some backup slides as well that we will have Dana, if you wouldn't mind PDFing those and putting them in the handout section so that people can download those as well to get additional information. As Natalie mentioned, the website is ruralsafetycenter.org, and if you do go to the far right subtask, resources, and do that drop down, the toolkit is in the bottom right hand corner of the resources drop down. While we are waiting to see if anyone has any questions, which you can go ahead and again type into that chat pod on the left, we do have one more poll question for you. And that is, a potential user of the Rural Intelligent Transportation System Toolkit must be intimately familiar with ITS. True or false? Okay, and it does look like everybody has gone ahead and answered the poll question. Natalie, if you'd like to address that, please.
Yeah, so great. It seems like the majority of you understand that the intent of the tool is to be able to be approachable by those even without knowledge of ITS, and so it's great to see that. Looks like everybody generally understands that. So we hope to see feedback on how you're using it. Jamie?
And now we are going to go on to our case studies. Our first case study is going to be Colorado, and they're going to talk about their planning that they're doing for intelligent transportation systems for the future. So Bob, I'm going to turn it over to you at this time.
Thank you, and welcome everybody. I'm sorry, you can hear me, Jimmy, right? Just heard a weird noise on my phone. So thank you. So I just want to describe what we're doing here in the state of Colorado. We're really focused right now on creating a smart mobility plan in our statewide planning efforts. This is our first effort to institutionalize both smart mobility planning, which has a fiber element and a technology element, as well as a connected autonomous technology element. And we see fiber as our first building block into the technology world that is required to be successful in the connected autonomous environment. So I want to kind of go over what we've been doing with our fiber planning and development. And what we've started is kind of the big screen there you see in the middle of basically our state with the blue and green lines is our current fiber and planned fiber routes. We have about 1,400 miles of fiber currently in our state. We've been working on it for several years, and we're getting our main interstate corridors done and starting to reach into the rural parts of the state. But basically, what we wanted to do is first document what we have, get clarity around that, and then do a needs assessment to create a fiber-wide, statewide plan, which is the map in the bottom right-hand corner, which almost looks like all of our highways, and it's about actually 9,300 miles that would be required for us to have a truly connected autonomous statewide network. That is our end game. It might take us 20, 30, 40 years to get there, but the idea is a couple folds here. One is improve commerce through platooning, improve technology and transportation networks within all parts of the state, both tourism, agriculture, rural parts up in the high country, into the front range, as well as bringing rural broadband, closing the digital divide, and some other benefits by bringing that fiber to the communities. So we've got that plan done, and we are starting to put those into our plans, in our regional plans, so that we can start funding more builds into those communities. What we do, and this unfortunately slide did not come out perfect, but basically what we've done is we really leverage our partnerships. We have unique statutes in our state that gives us the authority to be compensated for our right-of-ways at the state level for the highways. And basically what we've done is we don't necessarily look at, it wasn't prescribed as how to be compensated. It's just saying that there has to be some sort of relationship that shows fair value for the use of the right-of-way. And so what we've done is we've leveraged P3's public-private partnerships to improve several of those bullets on the screen as you see there. But the point is to help expand our fiber network faster, better, quicker, and a win-win. Basically a win for the industry, win for the state, and win for the citizens. Because at the end of the day, we believe that those partnerships will help expand the rural broadband issue as well as reduce the digital divide. I do want to go over how these partnerships can really flourish, and we've kind of called this our 5P, but it's basically public and public-private partnerships that have we've done recently in a suburb of Colorado Springs in the state, where this is Manitou Springs, and basically what we've done is you can kind of see the S-curve of a highway, and we were going to pull fiber there, and what we've done is we kind of open up our eyes and broaden our relationships, where we brought the city of Manitou in, Colorado Springs Utility, we brought Colorado Springs in, and then we brought the counties in. There's actually two counties to the left of this, is Teller County and then El Paso County. And then we also brought in a company named Zayo that came to the table, and we kind of all put our chips on the table here. And what we've decided was, well, why don't you buy fiber, you buy conduit, you pull in the manholes, you do the labor. And at the end of the day, what we've done is we've improved communications for fire stations in the community, got 2 cell towers put up from a company from Zayo. We've also put some ITS equipment along the S-curve of the highway, and both the 2 counties' PSAPs are now communicating for resiliency for their local 911. So those were some great outcomes, and that's just, now they take some time when you have more chefs in the kitchen, but at the end of the day, we reduce the expenses for everyone. In fact, for the most part, no one exchanged actual dollars. It was actually exchanging assets or putting assets together to create one unified network there and building it once. So that's our fiber plan. I'll stop there and hand it back to Jamie.
Thank you very much. And now at this point, we do have another poll break for everybody. And so we were wondering, has your state created or is it currently creating a statewide mobility plan? Yes, no, I don't know. And if the answer is yes, what state do you live in? You can answer that over in the top right corner. And if no, what state do you live in the bottom right-hand corner? I'll just give everyone a few minutes to go ahead and type in those answers. Okay, and so it does look like we have about 73% of people who don't know whether or not they have a statewide mobility plan, about 17% who say yes they do, and about 9% who say no they don't. Let me expand this here. Of the ones that definitely do, there is Colorado, Oregon, and North Carolina. And of the ones who do not, Louisiana, Indiana, Iowa, and Canada and Washington.
I'm glad Colorado got it right, whoever's on there. But you know, this is good feedback because I think we have to have a dialogue around this because, as we all know, and I think the interest of this is just the main purpose of this call is really how do you institutionalize technology into what we do every day. We can't keep widening roads. So, you know, I think it's important to start having that discussion within your states and start how do you memorialize the work moving forward. So good feedback, actually. I know I've met with some Oregon folks, so I know that they're doing a good job over there, too. I'm waiting.
Bob, I have switched back to the presentation as well, so you can feel free to go ahead when you can see it.
Yeah, it's still loading. Just give me a quick second here. I don't know. Did I change the screen there, Jamie? It's still loading for me.
Currently, you are on the Smart Mobility PowerPoint slide.
Yeah, give me a quick second as this loads.
And while that is loading, for anyone who did have a hard time with the demonstration of the Rural ITS Toolkit, the PDF of those slides is now available in the handout section in the bottom left-hand corner, as well as I mentioned before, the rest of the PowerPoint slides are available in the top PDF.
I think, Jamie, it's up now. So I'll continue with the smart mobility. So when we look at the fiber, that's just the building blocks. You know, we've got to put fiber in. In our eyes, we've looked at different communication, microwave, cellular, all different ways of communicating, radio, and we've landed obviously onto fiber, which is the most stable form of communication. As we further rely on our network for technology, we need to have the stability of that means of a communication medium. So using that building block, that we feed that into our smart mobility plan. And what our smart mobility plan, we're in the midst of doing that right now, but what it's supposed to create is a 5-10 year vision plan by using technology to maximize our transportation industry. And the idea, obviously, is to improve safety and reduce congestion on our roads. We have one of the, as well as a zero deaths goal within our state, and we take that seriously, and we hope that technology can contribute to that, to lowering that number. So the other thing is data. Data is important for us to collect to make thoughtful and sound decision in real time. So we've been really looking at how do we grab data, what data do we get off the roads, what data do we get off of the vehicles when they start becoming connected in the next 2 to 3 years. How can we use that data to put material on the road, run our snowplows in the right place, making sure that our safety patrols are responding in a timely fashion, as well as reducing the amount of response time for first responders. What we're going to do is we haven't prescribed what technology it is. We have about 70 tools in a toolbox that we're pulling together right now, and we're putting it into a GIS system. But in those tools, we really have them broken into categories like safety, congestion, and so forth. But within those buckets, we actually put them in 3 additional buckets. Is it conceptual, pilot, or mainstream? And in our definition, mainstream is what other states will be doing or have been doing with ITS devices. Conceptual means to us is other states might have tried it, but we haven't tried it here in the state of Colorado. And then a pilot means no one in the United States has done it, or it's very minimal anywhere in the United States. And so what we want to do is allow our regions, we have 5 regions, we've broken our state into 5 regions, and allowing the regions to have some autonomy around, can I prescribe what I want for my community, because we have 50 plus 14,000 foot peaks, and we have Great Plains on our eastern side. And with the diversity of landscape and urban and rural and agriculture and mountain skiing and so forth, it's created some very unique transportation needs. And so when we go out and we start talking about our planning around the smart mobility, we break it into the regions, and we give them the opportunity to take it into these buckets and let them decide if they'd like to pilot something or use something that's mainstream or conceptual. And we're literally kicking that off next week in our regions, where we'll go into the regions and discuss what would they like to do and build a bottoms-up approach to our smart mobility plan. Historically in our state, we've kind of had a more top-down approach, but the idea is if we can have people kind of create their own plan, their own idea, and then roll that up into a state plan, we'll have more success in adoption with technology. I can explain that we've been working on this since really January. We kicked it off in May around a framework. We're in phase 2, where this is where we're going out to the regions. Our hope is to have that done by the end of November. We'll review it with our staff, and then we'll move it into the statewide plan in February. When that is kicked off in our statewide plan, this section of the plan, which is new, will already actually be done, so we won't have to revisit it, but it'll be the first time that the chapter has been institutionalized in our statewide plan. So the way we look at these building blocks is we start with the regional technology plans, which I just mentioned. They'll roll into our statewide plan, which is our Colorado plan, and then we need to start linking it to other plans within the state. We align ourselves with several other groups within our MPOs or our TPRs, and trying to make sure that there's some alignment by any other smart cities or smart roads initiatives within the state, that we have continuity between the plans. And then the idea is obviously when it's in the plan, we can start budgeting and create institutional support. And then, of course, that makes our future for technology. So thank you very much. Back to you, Jamie.
Perfect, thank you. And at this time, we will take any questions that you might have for Bob in the left-hand corner in the chat pod. While you are doing that, we do have another poll question for you. Dana, can you go ahead and move us to the poll question, please? It's poll 4. Thank you. Colorado DOT is planning for Colorado's ITS future through which of the following? A smart mobility plan, regional technology plan, fiber public-private partnerships, all of the above, none of the above, I don't know, or I don't remember. Okay, and Bob, it does look like everyone's had a chance to fill out the poll question if you'd like to talk about the results.
Yeah, and it is all above, so great job. It takes a lot of work and a lot of discussion to, as we may all know if you're working within a DOT or so forth, the physical infrastructure, roads, concretes, is the nature of our discussion, for the most part in DOTs, and transitioning that into fiber optics and technology has been challenging, getting that institutionalized. So, you're right. All these are items that we have to address, and you got to pull them together to make a successful smart mobility plan. So thank you very much.
We do have a few questions that came in for you on the chat pod. The first of which is, how do you partner with a private entity while also making sure you are not favoring one private entity over another?
Yeah, and I started responding on the chat. So what we do is we basically use an unsolicited bid form, and basically when a private partner wants to come in and build fiber on our right-of-way, they fill out this form and they submit it to us, and then we review it and start the discussion. We're not putting anything out to bid, so that's not our intent. Obviously, if we did that, that's a different discussion. But the whole point is we don't look at one entity other than they're coming in to use the right-of-way, and we don't look at them differently if they're government. We don't look at them differently if they're a small, medium, or large telecom, middle mile, or ISP, or social media company, which we're starting to see come into our rural parts. So that's how we kind of keep it fair and steady based on our state statutes, is that submittal of an unsolicited bid.
Thank you for that. And you do have one more question that's come in, and that is, if 5G becomes the favored connectivity mode in the future, will it be possible to connect to the fiber established within Colorado?
Yes. So what we've done in part of our partnerships is the private industry, either being cellular or even a telecom company, we do make our fiber available for either lease or partnership as well, but the lease can also be there. The idea is quicker response and furthering wireless connectivity throughout all parts of the state. It's not just 5G, but even small cell. We've been successful in some partnerships with small cell in our canyons, which has been challenging for, obviously, public safety. So, in return, what we've done in those type of partnerships is they put in the forest brown, infrastructure, but provide us ITS equipment that can go on to the small cells and fiber in exchange for the use of the right-of-way. So it's a kind of a win-win. We've improved public safety. The private industry got to deploy their small cell technology on our road, and we got fiber and cameras on the road that we didn't have in a small canyon. Those are the partnerships that we're seeing flourish through our state. So when you move into 5G, I think 5G is going to still have some challenges, but the fiber will always be available for any wireless company for any of the technologies.
We do have another question that came in as well. Is there a consideration for active transport within your plan?
So I'm thinking active transport. I'm hoping I had defining that correctly. Maybe I should ask for clarity. What do you mean by? So I see active transport. I think of transport as in the transportation industry, or transport onto our fiber optics. Bicycles and pedestrians. Okay. So yes, there is, and we've been working with several of our bicycle and pedestrian organizations here within the state, and then we're actually testing what technology we can promote within the bike ped industry to have automation and interaction between our signals and other vehicles within our smart mobility, as well as we brought transit and mass transit into that discussion as well. So we want to see how all technology can interact with each other and provide a safe and comfortable environment for all modes of transportation. Because we also believe that bicycles can have a huge impact, positive impact on interacting with the infrastructure once it becomes, we'll say, quote unquote, smart. Anything else?
Nope, I think that's all the questions for now. I do want to thank you one more time for sharing Colorado's experience with us as well.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Next up, we have Tim, and he is going to talk about Iowa DOT's planning process for intelligent transportation systems as well. Tim?
Yes, thank you for having me. I'm Tim Simodynes. I'm our ITS engineer at the Iowa DOT. Been here for about 6 years now. Our Intelligent Work Zones program, actually goes back to 2013. That summer, we had a couple construction projects that had in rural areas that had big backups, and as a DOT, we were not even aware of it, and then ended up getting some bad publicity and kind of a black eye from our, and usually it was an incident related to a work zone that led to these big backups on the interstate, and then us not having awareness of it was kind of a problem. So management said, well, we have ITS. What can we do with ITS to address this so this never happens again? So the initial focus was, what can we do with intelligent work zones to monitor some of our rural work zones? One of the other things we did kind of early on was traffic incident management planning, which is kind of being prepared for something to go wrong, not just work zone related, but this was kind of a special emphasis on the work zones. So kind of back up to give a snapshot of Iowa. We've got 9 metro areas kind of spread across the state. 8 of those we have ITS, permanent ITS deployments of cameras, sensors, dynamic message signs. Those are in rural areas as well. We have fiber connecting, our U-shaped fiber network there, connecting 4 of those metro areas. And then we're currently working on adding fiber and more ITS in Dubuque, and then also along the rest of I-80. Adding fiber gives us the connection between the metro areas and also allows us to deploy permanent devices along those corridors as well. The other thing we have in Iowa is a single statewide traffic management center. It's located centrally. Now that traffic management center is open year-round, 24 hours a day. They can monitor the system. They control all of our permanent DMS and DOT-owned portable DMS and even contractor-provided dynamic message signs. That is. And they use TransSuite software to manage our ITS network as well. So that's one of the resources we had. So for what we wanted to do for Intelligent Work Zone was to get a contract and the ability to put additional devices out in rural areas where we didn't already have coverage. So we used portable cameras, the same type of camera that we've got in our permanent installation, they're pan, tilt, zoom. We tie them into our Traffic Management Center, which also makes them available to our 511 public website. If they happen to be located near a metro area, near our ITS network, we can use point-to-point radios and then stream video continuously, just like our permanent cameras. In rural areas, we have to use a cell modem, and with 5 years of experience, we've had both positive and negative experiences with cameras. We've tried things like downloading recorded clips and showing those. We've done time of day streaming, and I could give a whole other talk on what we've learned with our rural cameras. For sensors, we use portable Wavetronics side-fire radar. These are the same sensors that we use in our metro areas. They collect traffic speeds and volumes in some, like 3 categories of classifications by lane every 20 seconds. So pretty good detailed devices. If you're talking intelligent work zones, a lot of time for Q detection, people will just use standard Doppler radar. You can get speeds with those, but you can't get volumes. And we found in a lot of cases we like to have the volumes along with that, and some classification too. So we've gone with all the Wavetronics. They're a little more expensive, but we like the data we get from them. We also included in here, in this statewide contract, portable dynamic message signs. Again, these come back to the Traffic Management Center, and that was nothing new. We'd actually been requiring all contractor-provided portable dynamic message signs to be controlled by our Traffic Management Center from even before this contract started. Just kind of lay out what we typically do for a work zone in this case. Let's see if I can get this to work. Arrow here. We have the work zone off the south end of what you see here. So we're looking at southbound traffic coming into the work zone. The green pins are where we would put our Wavetronic sensors, getting speeds and volumes. And then the red is where we would put portable dynamic message signs. I should back up here and say one of the concerns with taking this statewide approach was, how is this going to work if our contractor has traffic control devices out there, and then we have a separate vendor bringing in intelligent work zone devices, and are they going to conflict with each other? Are they going to be able to coordinate and get each other's way? Well, what we found is for most of the equipment, our intelligent work zone equipment is out in advance of the work zone and not in the work zone. So that really hasn't been too big of a problem. For our Q detection then, we'd have our portable DMS out here spread out every mile to 2 miles. and we have to kind of predict what the worst case is, how far back we think our queues could get. The other thing we look at, rather than going with a fixed distance for our signs, we usually try to look for where there's some site obstruction, either an interchange or a hill. For us, it didn't make sense to do queue detection and warning if it was a big valley where you could see a mile ahead on the road. That the queue detection wasn't really necessary. So instead, we kind of focus on places where you may not see a backed up queue as you're driving in this rural area, not expecting it. So with our system, as these sensors would detect slow speeds, we use a slow threshold of like 35 miles per hour. The signs would automatically light up and say slow traffic ahead. If they detected even lower speeds than that, say 20, 25 miles per hour, they would switch to stop traffic ahead. And at that point, we would also trigger an alert to our traffic management center. So then the traffic management center would be aware and could go take a look at any cameras in the area, verify that it was what was causing the backup, and if needed, they could always change the message on these signs to give it something more descriptive, if it's interstate closed or crash ahead or whatever might be more informative to the drivers rather than just slower stop traffic ahead. I mentioned before traffic incident management routing. Part of those traffic incident management plans was, okay, if we have a crash in this work zone, what do we want to tell everybody? So the drivers, so we put portable DMS at the diversion points. So if somebody's coming on US 20 and the interstate's closed at the south end, we could tell them don't use I-35, the interstate, but instead go over here to US 69 as a diversion route. So we put those portable DMS in strategic locations for diversion routes. This is like a typical summer. This is 2018. This is where we've got devices deployed across the state, or had. The color coding tells us different things, where in this case the blue squares are portable DMS provided by contractors through their actual construction contract. The orange is where we've got them deployed. White would be ones that have been removed now that the summer's over. So you can see we have it varies on what construction is going on each summer. Here, the program started in 2014. We deployed devices on 14 different projects, and over the last 5 years, we've kind of leveled out in the mid-30s for how many projects we deploy each summer. One of the big advantages to this project, to this statewide contract, is it has flexibility. So if a work zone that you didn't think was going to be a problem at the beginning of the year starts having problems and they want to have a camera or queue detection, we can quickly respond and deploy devices. That's all built into our statewide contract. So when we started this in the beginning, we actually stole the idea from Minnesota. They used an intelligent work zone contract to cover several construction projects, not quite statewide, so we kind of took it that next step to go statewide. We had SRF Consulting as an on-call consultant. We used them and their expertise. They had a retired engineer from Minnesota, John Jacobs, and he helped us set up the contract and kind of take some of the lessons that they've learned and then make it into a statewide contract. We ended up selecting Street Smart Rental as our vendor. It was not just a low bid, but a qualifications-based selection. We wanted to make sure we had somebody that knew the technology that could be relied upon. Our ATMS software is TransSuite, so TransCore helps us integrate all these devices and make sure they're working in our software. DTS provides our statewide ITS maintenance for our permanent devices, so they're involved both maintaining permanent devices in a work zone, and then they also help us if we put on a point-to-point radio on one of our cameras. Our traffic management center is staffed by CAPS, so they're a big player in this and giving feedback and helping us monitor the system. And then the Center for Transportation Research and Education at Iowa State University is a big partner too. They're taking all of our sensor data and able to do really neat things with the sensor data. It's kind of an overwhelming amount of data, but they make it actually usable and useful. Another big benefit to this is because everything is tied in through the Traffic Management Center, it's also tied into our 511 system, both web and mobile. All these devices, like this is a fairly current snapshot of the Ames area, and of all those devices, a small fraction are permanent cameras and permanent dynamic message signs. The rest are all temporary trailers and for construction, but to the public you're able to see everything that's there. This also includes going out in our data feed. So if any third third-party service provider that has traffic data, they can get all this information as well. So very little of our intelligent work zone is standalone in the field. It's all integrated. This is a page that Iowa State C38 puts together for each of these work zones. It takes our sensor data, and there's several different views. Here we're looking at one that's looking at, across multiple weeks and seeing eastbound and westbound are the two colored lines, and you can see the queue lengths, speeds, vehicle counts. So this gives both management, our central office, and our district staff the ability to see how different work zones are performing. If they get a report that says, yeah, this seems like it's backing up all the time, or I was in a 3-mile queue for a half hour, they can actually go and use these tools and see, was it really that bad? Has that been consistent? Is that an anomaly? It gives good feedback and instantly, too. They're updating these sites every day. Looking at our intelligent work zone approach, it's really just one piece to all the activities that we do safety-wise as far as the traffic incident management planning that I mentioned. We can put things into the contract to make sure that they're monitoring the traffic control continuously or daily, and even extra enforcement by law enforcement to help control speed. And really, we started this in our 5th year of this program. It was really early on in the program. We said we're doing intelligent work zone to kind of address problems, but there's a lot we could do to prevent some of these problems in the first place by going back to the project development and contracting. We can do more to restrict and be more precise on which hours and which days of the week we're allowing the work to prevent having backups in the first place. So some of the benefits I think I've covered already is just our increased awareness that the TMC has. A camera is always very valuable. The TMC gets a call or a report that there's a problem. The first thing they want to do is see it with their own eyes on a camera to make sure they're reporting accurately. So the ability to put out cameras on these projects is very valuable. And then the ability to integrate everything in one place, have that flexibility to add projects during the summer, or even devices. If we realize we need our sensors to go out farther from the project, within a day or two, we can have additional devices deployed. And then just the knowledge that we've got good information going out to the DMS and to the public is very good. I included this link to this website. I guess maybe an apology that it was never developed to be a public-facing website. It's the one that we use, that whole team of people that I mentioned that has to coordinate all this. We use this really as a working site to track the status of our projects and locations of devices. But we've also added in there reports, and you can link to Iowa State's reactor website is where they show all of our data. So if you're curious, I encourage you to go through that. Like I said, I apologize. It's not the prettiest looking, but there is good information there. The other thing I wanted to mention, looking at the rural ITS toolbox, is that Sinclair and I are talking about a couple efforts today, but looking at the list, we've also done a fair amount with wrong way detection. We haven't done any alerting in Iowa, just the detection so far, so we've been learning from that. We have intersection conflict warning systems deployed, about 6 of them around the state, and we're adding more. And then we also do a lot with our either crowdsource and probe data, Waze and INRIX. And the last one there is our truck parking, which Sinclair will be able to talk about next. That's my last slide, so thank you for your time.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Tim. And we're going to go to another poll question for everybody. The next poll question is, which is not an advantage of Iowa's statewide approach to intelligent work zones? Increased integration and monitoring by the TMC, dedicated IWZ team reduces burden on field staff, more accurate dynamic message sign messages, flexibility to quickly add new devices and new projects, less effort required to manage intelligent work zones, or none of the above. I'll just give everyone a few seconds to fill this out. The last option is I don't know, I don't remember. Okay, and Tim, at this point I have closed the poll and broadcast the results. So I'll be able to see them.
Yeah. I guess my intended answer there was the less effort required, because it actually does take quite a bit of effort from that whole central team to manage it with the statewide approach. I suppose you could argue that we did take all that burden away from our district staff. So we have our district construction engineering, construction inspection staff are stretched extremely thin, and if we were trying to ask them to make sure ITS and IWZ equipment was working in the field, it probably wouldn't happen. We'd overwhelm them easily. So we put a lot of effort into that team that I showed in our central office to make sure the whole system runs smoothly and remove that burden from our districts. I do see we have a question there too about using it for unplanned incidents. We've deployed devices for, I guess I would still call those planned incidents, non-work zones. If we have an intersection or we have a bike ride across Iowa every year and we need to deploy a camera or a sign, but it's not set to be deployed in hours. It's usually a day or two to get devices deployed. So we have never done anything for something like a crash. It's that short term.
And thank you, Tim. I want to thank you one more time for speaking on behalf of Iowa for us as well. So
My pleasure.
we're just waiting for the presentation to come up, and then I am going to pass the presentation along to Sinclair. Tim, while we are waiting for the presentation, it looks like there is an additional question, and that is, what type of funding do you use to pay for the work zone system and for other programs?
Yeah, that was interesting as well. We started off that first summer, since none of it had been planned, they set aside, I forget how many, $100,000 or so, just dedicated to that. But then after the first summer, management said, well, this is all part of work zones and construction projects anyway. Let's charge it to the construction projects. So that's what we've been doing. We do all of our ITS in Iowa with state funds rather than federal funds, just has less red tape to go with it. So we use state funds, but we do use construction funds. We just pay it with a separate project number to track it separate from the construction project.
Perfect, thank you. Sinclair, it looks like the slides are up. If you'd like to go ahead and go.
All right, thank you. So, good afternoon, everyone, or morning, or wherever that time zone is that you're at. So, how many of you have, well, this is a rhetorical question, but have, driven in the evening time and you've driven past, truck stops or rest areas and, this is the image that you see. There's definitely, trucks, we have the problem all the time of trucks parking, down ramps of rest areas and in places that are not designated, that they really shouldn't be. So this is some of the problems. And then for the drivers, there's driver hours of service limitations. And then, like I mentioned, if the rest areas and truck stops are full, and the hours are almost up for the driver, that becomes an issue, and perhaps the best solution is not taken because they need to find a place to park. And a recent survey revealed 83% of drivers spend greater than 30 minutes searching for parking. So that's quite a bit of time. I know I would not make good decisions probably at the end of that 30 minutes. So part of the solution that we came up with was as part of the MASTO consortium, 8 of the 10 states that are part of MASTO applied for a Tiger grant, and were awarded that for $25 million, $31.2 million in federal funding. And in Iowa, you can see the numbers there of the federal share and the state contribution. But this is going to allow at the time right now, it's 139 public and private sites to be instrumented to start allowing us to communicate with, in real time, the parking availability on our public and some private parking spaces. And we're looking to launch this in January of next year. So this is the project extent. These are the MASTO states, and as I mentioned, Missouri and Illinois opted out of this. This is really looking at looking at the freight corridors along these interstates and connecting the states. And so when this is fully operational with all of the states instrumented and communicating the data, that it's really going to allow the truck drivers to make more informed parking decisions. So this is showing, excuse me, this is showing currently our Iowa's deployment. You'll see I have, so this is broken out by private and the public rest areas. So the public rest areas are blue and the private truck stops are red. And we are also adding, you'll see in the table on the right there that I have like a +2. We're also looking at adding, we had a little bit of extra money and we're still waiting for federal highway approval, but adding one more set of rest areas on I-35 to the north of that blue dot on I-35, which runs north-south through the state. So we have a total of 42 and then hopefully another 2 of sites that are going to be instrumented, and that will be reporting real-time availability. And we have, of those, 15 would be private truck stops, or we have a couple of like McDonald's type places that have a lot of parking availability. So some of the types of sites that we're putting the technology in are, like I said, all of our public rest areas on I-80. There are some on I-29, I-380, and I-35. And I think, yeah, so that's for the public rest areas. And then we have some way stations and private truck stops. We have a large racetrack and casino that has a fair amount of truck parking availability. And then some common chains in Iowa that we're instrumenting are Come and Go, Casey's, Quick Star, Taylor Quick Pick, and McDonald's. Some of the bigger ones like Pilot and Travel America did not want to participate. They're actually developing their own reservation system, and we're wanting to go that route instead. So the technology solution, how are we going to collect this parking data? There are many different systems out there for counting open parking spots, and several of them have been tried with other, as pilot projects. But generally speaking, every system uses one of 2 methodologies: entrance and exit counts, or space occupancy counts. Each has advantages or drawbacks based on the specific technology used to implement it, but ultimately each state had to figure out what they wanted to do based on their own preferences. 5 states are doing the measuring just the entrance and exit driveway counts, and 2 states are using the space by space by putting various technologies in there. And then Iowa is using a mix of both of those methods depending on the size of the parking lots. So the main technology that we're using is the in-ground magnetometer pucks that we put, you can see at each one of those little dots is a puck, and we lay 2 of those per parking spot. And those are at all of our rest areas and some of the private sites. It basically is if 25 to 30 spaces, we would use the pucks, and then the next technology is using the camera with the built-in video analytics that's at the entrance and exit, and those are usually like the 50 to 1,000 parking spots. One of our truck stops on I-80 is the world's largest truck stop. I think that's the name of it. But anyway, they've got like 1,000 spots. So this is the kind of technology that we're using in that. And that's an access camera with the city log to do the analytics, and that's built into the camera. So for system validation, we're also installing pan-tilt zoom cameras. So these are done to do making sure that the cameras or the technology is actually doing what it's supposed to and that it's accurate. So our vendor is using this, our contractor is using this, and we're also working with Iowa State, the C-Tree that Tim had mentioned in our IWZ projects to help with some of that validation. So we are looking at having all of our sites fully constructed by mid-October, and I just checked with our contractor this morning, and we have a handful left. So they're moving right along, so that's exciting. And as I mentioned before, our go-live date is January 4th of next year, and then as per the Tiger Grant requirements, that'll run for 3 years. So the next decision is how the parking data is going to be aggregated and analyzed before we disseminate that to the truckers. This was a key step in creating the system so that it would appear seamless to the truckers and drivers no matter what state that they were in. And in Iowa, this data feed is in our travel information website and app are the only ways that we'll be disseminating the information. The other states are actually putting signs out, static signs on the roadways with, or changeable message signs also, with a small, some are using full signs that are DMS, and some are using just the numbers are on a static sign that are dynamic. So in Iowa, we decided to go the data route only. So after looking at various setups, ultimately the partnership settled on creating a central warehouse for receiving and storing the system data. So that's where, right here is where the MAPC data warehouse is and where the archive will reside. So in Iowa, as I mentioned, one of the ways that we're getting the information out is through our 511 Traveler website. So we're taking the TPIMs, the TSPS, Osprey, that's where our data feed's going to be coming out of from our contractor, and that will feed our traveler information website. So we're in the design because we essentially have until January before the go live date to have this finished. So we're in the design phase right now. So these are our drafts, that's why I put that in parentheses. So this is kind of what a site would look like for a rest area, where we'd have the camera images and the availability, and the color is green because it's open, and there are several spaces open available for truck parking. For the privately owned truck stops, we're doing a little bit different approach because we're not putting the camera images out there. That was a request by the private sites. So instead, we're looking at having the aerial satellite view instead of the live cameras. We're going to be making sure that we clarify that that is not a live view. We don't have drones hovering over all of the private sites to show you an image. So we're putting some little disclaimer notes there. And then you'll see in the upper right corner that there is the flame. That means that it's filling up quickly, so it's a hot spot, just to let people know. And then down in the right corner, it's talking about, like this one is one that's available east or westbound, and so we're giving, upstream and downstream the next stops that have parking availability information with them. So this is showing kind of what the map is, and This is MnDOT's, a mock-up from MnDOT. They're also part of the same vendor that we use for 511, and they're also integrating the TPIMS data into their travel information website. So we're kind of partnering on this and building off of each other, which is nice and a cost savings. So this is showing if you have a personalized route, it shows on the left, it'll show the different parking availability. And again, this is a mock-up, so we're still working out the details on this. This is showing in Iowa. We wanted to make the clarification just with an icon to make it easier for an at-a-glance situation, so that you can see on the map that, one, by color as far as the availability, and two, by P is for the parking only rest areas, R is for our rest areas, and T is for a truck stop, a private site. And right now already on our 511 site, we already have the P and the R. They're just a little bit different icons, but that's already been our nomenclature for that on 511. And then this is just showing the meaning and then kind of the configuration. And again, we're kind of still playing with this stuff, so it's still kind of a draft. And this is, so the other part of this is we're also adding it to our mobile app. And this is going to be, this is actually kind of cool because it's, so we have a trucker app that's focused with, for commercial vehicle operators. And it's going to be a hands-free, eyes-free announcement. And you'll be able to, and again, this is, we're kind of working on this, but you'll be able to say, yes, I want to, I want to hear these parking availability, and then at what point do you want to be notified of the parking availability ahead of you? We have, everything's by direction, so it knows what direction you're traveling, and it will announce that you don't have to have a specific route that you're traveling on loaded in the app. So it'll tell you at certain intervals what the parking availability is. If one of them goes to low availability, it will announce that regardless. And but again, like I said, we're still working through the details on that. So for the next steps for deployment, as I mentioned, we're looking to finalize the construction in mid-October, doing some system testing in December, and along with user outreach and communications, and then with the go-live date in January, and then the 3 years for operations and maintenance. And if you want to see more, the project website is trucksparkedhere.com. That's all I had. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Sinclair. And I noticed that there are quite a few questions in the chat pod. But if anyone else does have any other questions, this is the final question and answer period, so please go ahead and put those over there. In the meantime, we are going to ask you one more poll question. And that is, I was approached to smart trucking does not include which of the following: all rest areas, way stations, and truck stops, in-ground magnetometer pucks, system validation with cameras, 511 integration, 511 mobile app, or I don't know, I don't remember. And Sinclair, while we're waiting for those answers to come in, there are a few questions we'll get started for you. The first one is, any ideas as to why Missouri and Illinois chose to opt out?
That I don't know. I apologize. I don't know if I kind of came in probably halfway through this project, so I wasn't in on the beginning. I don't know. Tim was in a little bit longer, but no, he's shaking his head no. So yeah, I apologize. I don't know the reason behind that.
Okay, no problem. The next question is, because different technologies are being used by different states, do you anticipate being able to provide recommendations regarding benefits and drawbacks of various technologies, or were the different technologies used as a reflection of some state-specific conditions?
Yes and yes. We're actually, they are going to be doing lessons learned. HNTB is the project manager for the whole group of this project, and I believe that their plan is to do kind of lessons learned. We actually had our last partnership meeting a couple weeks ago and talked about some lessons learned with that, and we're actually still going through some lessons. Apparently some of like our magnetometer pucks are falling asleep on the job, and we're working with the vendor of those to see what's happening and to wake them up and why that's happening, kind of thing. So, but yeah, really I think it's the different situations that the different states have and the technology that they're comfortable with or that have used, for other things. But yeah, they definitely, I believe that they'll be doing a lessons learned kind of at the end. We're not there yet, though. Did you have something else?
Yeah, this is Tim. I think part of it, too, was each state, we didn't really define exactly what we wanted. We left it up to the vendors, but there were proposals that we got to evaluate. So like the proposals we received proposed different technologies. So we kind of, as part of our evaluation, we had to pick the one that we thought was going to work well.
And along those same concerns, thinking ahead to winter, what aspects of your design took into consideration such conditions?
I think all of them, because I mean we can't have things that are above the pavement, right, because of plows. So yeah, and everything's sealed as far as I know, and so yeah, it definitely we have to consider winter. I mean, we live in Iowa, so we have lots of snow, and winter starts in 20 days here, or so, but officially.
The next question is, were there any safety or security concerns?
With regards to what, I'm not sure. I don't know if somebody can add on to their question. I'm not sure with regards to what.
Yeah, I guess for Iowa, we already had some cameras at many of our rest areas, and we actually do record them, so we've made them available if law enforcement or somebody wants to go back and investigate a theft or something. We're not doing any of that at the private sites. That was something we had to guarantee that a truck stop does not want any potential law enforcement or anything being done at those for their customers, against their customers, so we're not doing anything at the private locations.
I mean, we still are keeping those, but for the accuracy, we're still keeping those, but those are not broadcast out to the public at all. Just for verification.
And I think that, yeah, I think that probably addresses the question, but if not, can the person who posted that please put clarification in the chat pod as well? The next question for you is there a method to combine this availability of spot data into enforcement of driving over the time limit? For example, allow someone to drive another half hour or prove to truckers that there was a spot she should be off the road?
As far as I know, they can't be using these for law enforcement. Is that what you mean? Is that what that?
I do believe, or enforcement maybe by their company.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
I don't think that's been discussed yet.
Yeah.
That might be a good research question.
Yeah.
So one more additional question that came in is, are there any legal issues with providing too much information? For example, what if part of the system goes down without warning?
Well, I think that's, I don't think it's a legal issue. I mean, that's kind of always that, disclaimer, right? It's no guarantee, and really these truck parking spots are only for the painting or the painted spots. So, even though like rest areas or way stations or whatever, trucks are parking down the ramps, that's technically those aren't going to be showing up in our system. But once it approaches that there's a certain threshold of only so many spots left, we're just going to show low availability. But it's like with all of our data that we have, there's always that disclaimer of that there's no guarantee, and I think that's on our terms and conditions that would this would fall under also. So I don't believe so.
Yeah. And we built in some safeguards too, where like if the data doesn't change over a certain period of time or it drops to zero or something unreasonable, it'll automatically switch to no information, so it's clear that we're not showing old data.
And on 511 too, we have there are things that will show up too that like if a rest area is closed or if all of a sudden it's not getting data, it'll turn gray and have some message.
And just to go ahead and finish up this section of the webinar, I have broadcast the results for your poll question if you'd like to go ahead and address that, Sinclair.
Yeah, so the right answer is the first one that most everybody had. We're using, for the system validation, the cameras. I mentioned that C3 as well as the contractor is using those. Of course, we have the 511 integration with the website and the mobile app, as I mentioned. So yeah, that's really how we're getting the data feed and the 511 system, or how we're in Iowa, how we're going to be disseminating that information.
Okay, and one more time, I do want to thank all of our speakers for taking the time today to share their experiences with intelligent transportation systems with us. In this webinar, we do hope that you will have learned how to summarize the newly released Rural ITS Toolkit, restate how Colorado's DOT is planning for Colorado's ITS future, identify the pros and cons of a statewide approach to intelligent work zones in Iowa, and to summarize Iowa's approach to smart truck planning. A few upcoming webinars we do have for the Safety Center. The next one will be held on October 4th. It is part 1 in a 3-part series, which will be co-hosted by FHWA, NACE, and NLTAPA, along with the Safety Center. This first one will be on rural roadway departures. It will give a brief overview of the EDC5 initiative that is brand new, as well as talking about rumble strips. Part 2 of that series will be held on November 13th. And that one will go over 2 additional countermeasures for rural roadway departures. Our third webinar will be held on October 23rd, and that one will be on rural aging road users. I also want to mention one more time that we do have the National Summit on Rural Road Safety coming up December 4th through the 6th in Savannah, Georgia. Registration for this summit is now open, and it does include 3 training workshops as well as the summit. So please check out our website. We'd love to see all of you there. And if you do have any additional questions, please feel free to reach out to any of the 4 presenters. Their email addresses are now on the screen, and we will send that information out again in the thank you email that will go out in about a week, which will also have the archived link for this webinar as well. So we do want to thank you all for joining us today, and thank you again to Natalie, Bob, Tim, and Sinclair for taking the time to present.